It's hard to believe it took all these years for Mortal Kombat to get another movie, and given the long wait for this thing, I can't help but feel kind of underwhelmed. I don't have a lot of history with this franchise. I played the games a little bit as a kid, but I was always more of a Street Fighter guy, and I thought the 90s movie was fun, but the less said about the sequel, the better. That's about it. So I'm coming in not knowing a whole lot about Mortal Kombat, which turned out to be a good thing and a bad thing. It's bad in that they make a bunch of references to places and things in this movie that I guess were Easter eggs for the fans that I just didn't get, but it's good in that I went in not being very attached to or familiar with the lore, which the movie plays pretty fast and loose with. So in preparation for this, I went back and rewatched parts of the 90s movie just to refamiliarize myself with it, and a couple things jumped out at me. Number one, the fight scenes are not as good as I remember. The choreography seems kind of bland by today's standards. Punch, kick, flip, not a lot of creativity there. And two, as dumb and silly as it is at times, it still feels like a big movie. It has scope to it. There are some big set pieces. Outworld looks expansive and ominous. You look at some of the sets, like Scorpion's Lair for example, and it's like, alright, cool, they spent some money on this. Still very 90s, but by those standards, it's pretty good. By comparison, the fights in this new movie are probably better. They're more creative, though they do rely a lot more on CG. But hey, Sub-Zero freezes a guy's blood into an icicle and then stabs him with his own blood. How can you not love that? Unfortunately, though, it does feel a lot smaller than the original. Not only are there no major set pieces, there's really only a couple set pieces that even matter that much. You've got the Hanzo Hasashi compound from the opening scene, the best scene in the movie really, the temple where the Earth Champions train, which is really just a bunch of empty rooms in a sand pit, an MMA octagon where there's some cage fighting, and not much else. Now there are other set pieces, but they're all weirdly mundane. You've got Sonya's trailer in a junkyard, a cabin out in the woods, an empty warehouse. You do see Outworld for a little bit, but it just looks like desert and rocks with some different lighting. There's no imagination there. There's no awe or wonder to it. It all looks kind of cheap, honestly. And that's strange because I looked it up and the budget for this movie was like $95 million, and I actually thought it was a lot less than that. What they spent all the money on, I couldn't tell you, but it wasn't the sets. So they're already struggling to stand out from the original movie, and then it starts changing things. The 90s movie, for all its campiness, did kind of feel like the game, at least as I understood it. There's a bunch of tournament fights, the boss fight with Goro, and then it ends with Shang Tsung. But here, it's not like that at all. In fact, there isn't even a tournament. The entire movie is just the champions getting ready for the tournament. They talk about the tournament, they train for the tournament, and then there's a bunch of fights where Outworld tries to kill the Earth champions before they can compete in the tournament, and then they have the balls to sequel bait us with the tournament, among certain other things that we probably should have gotten this time around. So technically, there's no actual Mortal Kombat in this Mortal Kombat movie. What the f***? And while we're talking about changes, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because then we get to the characters. For some reason, I couldn't tell you why they did this, but they decided to add this new character, Cole, and have him be the main guy. Or should I say, they took out Johnny Cage, replaced him with Cole, and then had Cole take Liu Kang's spot as the main guy. I don't know. But then it gets even weirder, because now you've got this new character where the writers have to jump through several hoops to incorporate him into the lore, taking the place of a prominent character from the games, having time devoted to him when there's a number of other characters from the games that don't even appear in the movie, shoving the guy who you'd think would be the lead into a supporting role, and then to top it off, now that they've got this new lead character who, love it or hate it, is the audience surrogate, he's the one they've chosen to focus on, the movie isn't even really about him. Yeah, when you get right down to it, this movie isn't about Cole, and it certainly isn't about Liu Kang. It's about Sub-Zero and Scorpion. I mean, everybody else is there, and they do stuff, and Cole, I guess, has the most screen time, even though Kano, of all people, probably has more dialogue than he does. But throughout the whole movie, you can tell the filmmakers are just itching to get back to the Sub-Zero Scorpion plot. The only time they bother to explore any of the mythology it's about those two and they're pretty much the most important consequential characters in the movie. Sub-Zero especially. Sub-Zero is, for all intents and purposes, the final boss now. It's not Goro, it's not Shang Tsung. No, Sub-Zero is the biggest badass in the room. He's the guy everyone is scared of. He's the villain that nobody can take one-on-one. And hey, look, when I played the games as a kid, Sub-Zero was always my guy. So I kinda got a kick out of them making him so massively OP like this, but it's just weird to see Sub-Zero so far above Goro on the pecking order all of a sudden. And yeah, Shang Tsung is still the ultimate bad guy at the top, but he doesn't really do anything. He's just there for show, except for one scene where he gets to actually affect the plot. Otherwise, Sub-Zero is the main event now because him and Scorpion have got to settle their business, and that's the only thing the filmmakers seemed really invested in. There aren't even that many other characters that really matter that much. Sonya probably has the most to do after Cole because she's the woman and that's the rules now. Liu Kang does have a role to play, but he's still very much a supporting character. Kano is the comic relief and does a few things that drive the plot, so lucky him. Kung Lao is arguably the most charismatic person on the good guy's side, and he's pretty cool when he's there, but he's not there very long. Raiden is pretty bland and mostly just there to give exposition, and Jax you could have cut from the movie and not lost anything. They could have pulled a Johnny Cage with Jax too, but he's black, which means he has built-in plot armor now, so he gets his bionic arms, he fights a dude, and that's about it. Scorpion and Sub-Zero are the only ones who get a fleshed out backstory, with more hinted at that we don't see. They're the only ones with a personal stake in all this, but unfortunately, even though this is when the movie is most engaging, their stuff is handled very clumsily. Supposedly, they have some kind of ancient feud about a thing Sub-Zero references a few times but we never see, and then in the climax there's a huge twist involving them that comes right the hell out of nowhere, is completely unexplained, and I'm pretty sure is only there because it happened in the games at some point. But in the context of the movie, it's like, what the hell just happened? How the hell did it happen? I need more information, please. So the storytelling is kinda shoddy in general, though the best stuff goes to those two, and you don't learn that much about anyone else. And the 90s movie didn't spread the wealth very much either. It was pretty focused on Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Sonya, and a little bit with Raiden. And sure, a lot of it was goofy, but by the end of the movie, at least I felt like I knew who those people were. But here, most of these characters are a blank slate. We spend a lot of time with Cole, but we don't learn that much about him. We know he's not the fighter he used to be, but we don't know why. He has trouble finding his arcana, but we don't know why. Liu Kang really looks up to Kung Lao, and he gets some hints of a backstory, but it's not explored. Sonya does get an arc at least, but it's really just about her getting something that she should have already had when the movie started, and so on and so on. So overall, this movie is very hit and miss, I think. Some of the fights get too CG heavy, but for the most part, they're good. I wasn't blown away or anything, but I think I'd rank them above the 90s movie, and there are some game fatalities in there, so yay. The visual effects are acceptable. Some are better than others, but they're fine. But the story is weird in that we never even get to the actual tournament the movie is supposed to be about, and there are hints of a larger story, but unless they involve Scorpion or Sub-Zero, they're not treated like they matter at all. A lot of the sets make the movie look strangely cheap and small scale. The cast is a mixed bag. I'd say Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Kung Lao are the best, with Kano being a big scene stealer. But again, there's not that many of them that are very consequential. A pretty decent chunk of this movie is the Sub-Zero show, and that's time well spent because he's the best thing in it, but it's like the filmmakers just picked their favorites, made the movie mostly about them, and everyone else gets to do something that affects the plot if they're lucky. So I think the Sub-Zero Scorpion story is interesting enough that if you go in not knowing or caring much about the lore, you'll be reasonably entertained by this. But if that stuff matters a lot to you and you're expecting something more like the games, you may not get what you're looking for here. If all you care about is the action, there's plenty of that, but it can't carry the movie all on its own, and I just didn't feel like the rest of it was strong enough to pick up the slack. I think Mortal Kombat 2021 is a fun movie. It's worth watching on HBO Max. I wouldn't be rushing out on opening night to see it in a theater or anything, but I certainly wasn't bored by it. But I don't think some of the ideas they had here were the best way to go. For Scorpion vs. Sub-Zero the movie, this could have been a lot worse, but if they were hoping to launch a new Mortal Kombat movie series with this reboot, they may have missed the mark a little bit. Thanks for watching, everybody, and while you're here, let me know what you thought about Mortal Kombat 2021 in the comments. Ding the bell icon for notifications, and follow me on social media so you'll always know when I upload new stuff. The link is down there. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really needs to be on the receiving end of a Mortal Kombat fatality is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. You guys take care, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.